welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am starting Vlogmas, or sort of. I don't do the traditional Vlogmas where I do vlog clips and upload them every day because that is just a lot, and I don't know how people do it. It's really impressive to me that people can actually get a vlog edited and get up every single day. But I like to do weekly vlogs during the month of December to catch you up on what I'm reading, in addition to having all the cozy feels of all the holiday goodness. I also do the 12 days of Christmas, where I do 12 continuous videos back to back during the 12 days of Christmas. So that's kind of how I do Bookmas. I do that instead of Bookmas because it's half the amount of videos. So it's much more attainable for me. But in the meantime, you're gonna get a weekly vlog every single week, letting you know what I'm reading and how it's going. So kicking off this week, what am I reading? So it's December 1st, and I have about 50 pages left of Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm reading this for my Patreon group read, and my Zoom call is tomorrow night. So I'm down to the wire, which is how I have been with every single book that I've needed finished over the last couple of days. I've literally finished each book the day before a meeting because I had like an in-person book club. I had my last Miss Along Live today, and I finished that book yesterday. And then I have Cranford tomorrow, and I'm sure I will finish that book either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. But anyways, I will be finishing that. And then today I'm also starting David Copperfield, which will be a month-long read for me, where I'm reading like around 2 chapters a day. I think I'll have like 4 straggler chapters that don't fit into that schedule, so there'll be a few days where I'm reading more than that. I'm also going to be finishing Kristen Lavransdatter this month as well. I don't know if I'll do updates for that or not because I'm on book 3, so I might not really update much on that. And then I really need to start A Christmas Carol, which is the book that I will be teaching to my British literature class during the month of December, and I haven't even started it. So my plans for this week are definitely starting David Copperfield, starting and finishing The Christmas Carol, and definitely finishing Cranford. So I will be chatting with you more throughout the week and letting you know what I think and how I'm enjoying the books. I kind of have a mixed experience on Cranford so far, in that in the beginning, I wasn't really enjoying it as much. I was kind of feeling kind of bored by it. And then there's been a couple of stories that have kind of like interested me or been more heartwarming and like resonated more with me. So it's gotten better for me. So I'm hoping that I'll end on a high note. I'm kind of wondering, like, was I in a certain mood maybe when I first picked up the book, and that's why it kind of felt a little bit lackluster to me at the beginning? I don't know. But if you don't know anything about Cranford, it is kind of more episodic. It's about this town called Cranford, and there's like no men who live there. There's like a few. Like they have, I think, a vicar, and they have like some men who are like, they have like a butcher, and they have a surgeon, and I think they have like some men who do gardening and odd jobs around town, but like it's mostly women that live in this town, and all of them pretty much are old spinsters or widows. So like they even say like in the beginning of the book, like if a man comes here, he's probably gonna leave. Like either he's gonna die, or his regiment's gonna call him off, or he's just gonna be really uncomfortable being the only man at these social gatherings and he's gonna leave. So kind of the format it's followed is that there's usually like a story of something that's happening in the town, and we'll have like around 2 chapters that's devoted to that story. So there's one story where it's like one of the ladies is reading letters of her family that she's like, I'm gonna burn these because no one's gonna care about it when I'm gone, and maybe they're embarrassing. So they're burning letters and talking about her past, and that takes up a couple of chapters. And there's one where there's like these break-ins that are happening in the town, but they're kind of like greatly exaggerated, but everyone is like very on edge, and it's really it's really funny. There's a lot of parts in it that are humorous and funny anecdotes, and so it's been interesting. It's different from the only other Elizabeth Gaskell that I've read, which is North and South. It actually kind of reminds me of Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, like kind of a different like tonal feel in a way, but it's that same like small town dynamics of like funny weird things that are happening. I like Dandelion Wine better, but it feels episodic like that, and it feels like very small town. So anyways, that's it for this little introduction on like what I'm reading and what I'm thinking so far, and I will hopefully check in with you soon. Dickens. Time for a little update on the reading vlog. It is now Wednesday, so it's been a couple of days, and I am now, I think, 9 chapters through David Copperfield. So enjoying this. I kind of like forgot how well written it is, and I feel like Dickens is one of those authors, kind of like Jane Austen as well, where when I reread one of his books, I'm kind of like, okay, so which one really is my favorite? But I've actually reread several Dickens this year, as well as reading one new one, and none of those have dethroned Our Mutual Friend, which is my current favorite. But I'm kind of wondering whether or not David Copperfield will do that, because I'm just loving it so much. Really enjoying the story, even though it's quite angering in a very similar way that The Tenant of Wildfell Hall was, and that there's just a lot of domestic abuse. In this case, it's far more of children than it is of women, although David's mother is also experiencing abuse as well. But there are moments and snatches of joy in there, such as like right before David's mother remarries, he's staying with a servant and her family, and they are at this house on the river, which is not even a house, it's a boat that they turned into a house. And David loves it so much because he talks about how the appeal is that it was never intended to be a house. So the rooms are weird and it's very close and it smells like fish and all these things. But he talks about how it was basically like Aladdin's den in the way that it appealed to him. And I just thought that that spoke so true to like the novelty of things for children, of things that aren't intended to be that, make it just that much more special. For example, I always loved ice cream as a child, still do as an adult, but anytime I was allowed to have ice cream for dinner, which we would do sometimes on Sundays, my mom would call it Sunday, and we would have ice cream for dinner after Sunday night church. And the novelty of that was just like the best. It was like the coolest thing ever. Even though I had ice cream plenty of other times, it was just much more special because I wasn't really supposed to be having that. That's not your typical dinner. So the houseboat feels the exact same way. But the servant, Peggotty, her brother, I just love him. He's a fisherman, very rough around the edges, and it talks about his generous nature. And I have to read this passage to you because I think it's just so funny. So he has a generous nature and he does not want people to talk about it. And it says, if it were ever referred to by any one of them, he struck the table a heavy blow with his right hand, had split it on one such occasion, and swore a dreadful oath that he would be gormed if he didn't cut and run for good if it was ever mentioned again. It appeared, in answer to my inquiries, that nobody had the least idea of the etymology of this terrible verb passive, to be gormed, but that they all regarded it as constituting a most solemn imprecation. Anyways, just super enjoying this so far. Obviously, it's not mostly humorous, but there are snatches, and then there are also just different little blurbs of things. Like I love this quote that says, fashions are like human beings. They come in, nobody knows when, why, or how, and they go out. Nobody knows when, why, or how. Everything is like life, in my opinion, if you look at it in that point of view. And oh my goodness, I'm just enjoying it. I love Dickens' writing style. I know a lot of people criticize that he's too wordy, but I like his words, so it doesn't bother me. I'm doing pretty well in A Christmas Carol. I am not quite halfway. I think there's 5 staves and I've read 2. So I'm making my way. I'm through The Ghost of Christmas Past, and it's really fun because I grew up watching A Muppets Christmas Carol like so much. Every single year we would watch it, and there were many Christmas movies that we watched every year, but our tradition was to set up our tree the day after Thanksgiving, and then we would order pizza, even though we probably could have just had Thanksgiving leftovers, but we always got pizza and watched A Muppet Christmas Carol. So I watched it every single year growing up, and I probably have it pretty much memorized at this point, honestly. And so it's really fun to see in A Christmas Carol, because I think the last time I read it, I was probably a young adult. So it's been probably at least like 10, maybe 15 years since I've read it. And so it's really fun to compare and see how many sections of A Muppet Christmas Carol are word perfect. And then things that were like completely omitted, like the interaction between Scrooge and his sister and some other things like that, that like Scrooge's sister is never mentioned in that movie. But it's really fun to compare how similar or different they are, especially because I have such a nostalgic attachment to that movie. So it's been really fun. I'm really enjoying it. There's more humor in that one than I expected, which I should have expected because I like Dickens humor, but I typically think of A Christmas Carol as a more serious book. But even his more serious books have a lot of humor interspersed. Lastly, I did start an audiobook that is also related to A Christmas Carol, and it's Mr. Dickens and His Carol by Samantha Silva, maybe? I don't know. I'll have it on the screen here, but I'm listening to it on audio, like I said, and I have really mixed feelings. So I'm about halfway through, and I guess I'm gonna go ahead and finish it because it's a relatively short audiobook. Like, it's only 8 hours. So it has like some really good writing in that, like, it's very descriptive and very immersive, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. And I'm enjoying like some of the background as to why Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, and that Martin Chuzzlewit was being published periodically at the time and it wasn't doing very well, despite the fact that it was Dickens', I think, favorite that he wrote, but at the time it was not doing very well, and so he was under some pressure from his publisher to write a Christmas story, and I think that there was a little bit of a financial crunch. And to be honest, I really don't like how Charles Dickens himself is portrayed in this book, and I need to do a little bit more research and find out whether or not it's accurate, because he's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to be spoilery. In addition to treating street urchins very poorly, which is something I don't think Dickens would have ever done, because he was driven constantly in many of his novel writing about the mistreatment of orphans and urchins and those who are down on their luck, especially because that's kind of what happened to him with his father and how his father behaved. And so there are things that just like really are irking me that I feel like don't feel true to Dickens in the way that he wrote and in the way that he behaved, but I'd like to do a little bit more research to see if maybe he really was like this, but it doesn't seem to really be adding up for me. It's kind of fun to see like all the ways that the author is trying to tuck in little bits of the Christmas Carol, like where he got inspiration for some of the names and all of that kind of stuff, but I'm pretty sure that it's all fictional. I'm gonna get to the end and see, I guess, but a lot of it just feels like really made up and just a way for like the author to tuck in all kinds of things. And I like read a blurb for it and it said like, oh, it's so clever how she inserts these things, but this is an example towards the beginning of the book, so it's not spoilery. He ends up at a toy store and runs into someone whose last name is Fezziwig, and he's like, oh yeah, I should totally use that name. I'm like, that's not really very clever. That's like him literally seeing someone with that name and then deciding to use it. So it just feels like she tried to work in all the ways that he might have found inspiration, but I'm pretty sure that this book is highly fictionalized, and so it's not really ringing true for me. So I'll continue it because I don't have another audiobook right now, but I am not loving it, which is unfortunate because the writing style is really nice. Anyway, that is my midweek update. Today I am going to be working on several things. I'm working on the lecture notes for introducing A Christmas Carol to my British literature class tomorrow. And then I also am going to be making some more Christmas cookies. I've already made all the snickerdoodles, and today I'm going to be making butterscotch gingerbread cookies. I'll link the recipes down below, so that way if you're interested in any of these, sound super good, you can try them out yourself. But these are cookies I make every single year. I usually make at least 5 different types of cookies because I will bring them to church dinners and like our church lady night, and then I'll also bring them to like our co-op and our co-op Christmas party, and I'll sometimes give them out as gifts. So I make a lot of cookies and I will save like a small amount for our family for opening presents and stuff, but most of them I give away. Anyways, so that's my update. I will probably not be checking in until Friday to let you know how the rest of my week went, because Thursdays are crazy because it's our co-op day. So I will see you in a bit and let you know how my week ended up being with reading. Hi, it's Friday. Time for final update for the week. I actually did finish 2 books, so it's kind of nice. You get some closure and some kind of like wrap up at the end of this first vlog. So I finished A Christmas Carol, and it's just as delightful as I remember, and it just feels so nostalgic growing up watching Muppets Christmas Carol all the time. Just is wonderful. It's really fun to pay attention to some of the descriptions and some of the things that are very different from the movie and compare them, and it was just so delightful. Just makes my heart happy to read it. I also finished Mr. Dickens and His Carol, and that did not make me happy. I already talked a little bit about some of the issues I was having. I did some more research, and I will say that some of the ways that she portrays Dickens still kind of makes sense, because there's a lot of rumors and things about him having affairs when he was married to his wife that had 10 children. In the book at the very beginning, she's just given birth to their 6th child. And so yeah, so there's some speculation. There's not true full proof, but back then people would destroy their letters and things that were incriminating in that way, so it wouldn't have been passed down through history. So there's a lot more hearsay, I think, on those sorts of things, because it's things that he never owned up to. But regardless, I didn't like this. This is all supposed to be about his inspiration for A Christmas Carol, and none of it was actually what inspired A Christmas Carol. Because like I said, I was doing some research also for the class that I'm teaching A Christmas Carol on, and the reason why he wrote this was actually in response to factory working conditions for children at the time. That was what really furthered a lot of this, was how England was treating their poor. And that is not, this is not the only book where he addresses that. I think it's in most of his books, honestly, even though some of them have kind of more directions than others. Oliver Twist is very much has a lot of stuff about workhouses, and Little Dorrit has things about debtor's prison, and so some of them have some more specific things, but this is definitely generalized towards the wealthy Victorian people who, were stingy and not giving money, and, not realizing that they should be helping people, and, things like that. So there's definitely some remnants of that in there. The only things that the book says that is actually really legitimate is that he was publishing Martin Chuzzlewit as a serial and it wasn't doing well, and so he wrote A Christmas Story, and that's pretty much it. So even the time frame that they give in this book of when he published it and how quickly it sold out and stuff is different than the actual facts. And so it's really hard when you feel like this is about someone who is a historical figure, and not only is almost all the aspects of the story put in almost this fantasy way where nothing about it is factual, but you're also changing the personality of the person that you're writing about to make them seem like they're undergoing their own kind of Ebenezer Scrooge transformation, so that way you can make the story work. It's just odd. For example, at the beginning of the story, he has no money, he's not doing well, and so his family every year puts on this massive Christmas party, and he hasn't told his wife that he's not doing well, and so she's going and she's making all these plans for this Christmas party. So he gets upset at her, and she ends up leaving, partly for that and partly also because he met up with an ex-lover for no reason, just because he wanted to see if it would help inspire him in his story. So she takes the children and she goes to Scotland for Christmas, and he's just well, all this commercialism of Christmas is bad, which then translates into any expenditure at Christmas time, including charitable giving, which is so very unlike Dickens. But then, once he has his epiphany and is able to write his story, and his story makes money, all of a sudden consumerism at Christmas is good again, and it's great that they're spending all this money for these parties and all this money on gifts for his children and all this stuff. And so it's a total flip-flop. And there's some other things that take place that are super spoilery, but again, none of this even actually happened. So it just feels very disingenuous to an actual living historical person to do this. I feel like it would have made more sense if you had taken someone who's a friend of Charles Dickens, and they went through something similar and they share their story with him, and then he bases A Christmas Carol off of it. Like, that would have made more sense. But instead, they just made up a whole bunch of stuff, and afterward from the author, like the author's note, that she's even like, well, I hope that historians and people who know anything about Dickens' life can forgive me for all the liberties that I took, because I basically played loose and fast with all of it. Like, there was very few of this that was actually factual at all. Maybe that shouldn't bother me, but it kind of does. It doesn't bother me when you have historical fiction and there's a lot of stuff that's like, you know, maybe this happened, maybe it didn't, when it's a fictional character. When you take someone who's a real person and you just decide to attribute personality traits that are clearly not theirs, or viewpoints that they never held, or just different things like that to try to make a transformation story, it just feels so forced. I was basically hate listening to this at the end because I only had like 10% left, and I'm like, well, I might as well finish it. So I did, and I didn't like it, as you can tell. Okay, so that's gonna wrap up this vlog. We're ending with a book that was beautiful, amazing, 5 stars, loved it, and then a book based on that book that I would give like 2 stars. So we've got really an interesting range here. It was really fun to read them at the same time, honestly. Anyway, that's it for this vlog. So if you have any thoughts on the books that I've read this week, or the books that I'm continuing to read, which would be David Copperfield and Kristen Lavrenstetter, I'd love to chat with you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.